Hi everyone, welcome to my channel Inventive Mind. Thank you for joining me. This is part of my interview series. Today I have Vania, who is somebody I actually known since graduate school. We both were at different graduate programs. So when I was at National Institutes of Health as a graduate student with Johns Hopkins, and Vania was joined us at National Institutes of Health as a PhD candidate at Brown University. So she have a very impressive background. She has her BS of microbiology and minor in biochemistry and molecular biology from Penn State University. And she got her doctorate PhD in neuroscience from Brown University. And I actually we haven't connected in a while, so this is kind of connecting too, because I have been following her on social media and knew that she's doing a lot of different things. And I also found out she have an MBA from Quantic School of Business Technology. So she's going to kind of talk about what she's doing. She's actually is a neurology clinical specialty. She does a neurology clinical specialty. She's the founder of FreethePhD, a business consultant, a leadership coach, and a speaker. And she has a podcast. So, and she lives in San Francisco Bay Area. I live in Southern California. So I was actually going to use the same background, but I thought since you are in San Francisco, so I think it's better I use my regular background. Hi, Vania, how are you?
Hey, I'm great. And thanks for having me on your channel. It's really fun to be here. And I hope to share a little bit about my professional background for those who are interested, as well as some tips and advice for those who may be facing a career transition and/or may want to build up a passion project, just like I have with Free the PhD.
Yeah, that's why I really wanted to talk to you, because I do know that when you were launching your the PhD a few years ago, you were doing some research and you were like connected with me, because I actually didn't finish my PhD. I stayed in it for 6 years and took a terminal master's and came to law school. Only thing I didn't finish with the PhD is the thesis project, but I finished the boards and all the coursework. So but it's kind of interesting to see people who actually did finish the PhD and also transitioning out of the traditional academia research roles into something else. So we're going to make this discussion, stay tuned for the tips, because we're going to make it like, if you're thinking about not just the PhD, but if you're in a career that you're thinking about switching, you're going to kind of use these tips, because Vania really is helping people who are transitioning from different careers. Um, so Vania, can you share how did you get started, like your kind of background? Why did you decide neuroscience as your PhD path? Kind of discuss, how you got to where you are.
Sure, yeah. So I did a PhD in neuroscience, frankly, because I have always been interested in behavior. And so when we think about how to study behavior better, there's only a few fields that would make any sense for that. And the neuroscience program at the NIH GPP, graduate part, yeah. So
I know it's long.
the NIH Graduate Partnerships Program with Brown University is the program that I got into. And I had done more molecular work in my undergraduate experience. And for me, it just was not very satisfying as a scientist. It's really important work. It's very important to understand all the molecular processes that go on, but I just really disliked doing that kind of work. So it didn't click with me.
Resonate with you.
Yeah. So, I mean, I ran a lot of gels, I purified proteins, learned all about molecular biology and diseases and biochem. And it was not something that I was very interested in the long run. And so after I had graduated, I was like, well, what am I going to do with all of this experience in the lab, but not wanting to actually use it in a job? Yeah. So that was one of the main reasons I did a PhD. wasn't really sure what I could do with a bachelor's, using skill sets I wasn't really in love with. So I'm really happy I chose neuroscience, and that neuroscience chose me in a way that I got into the program. I did a lot of animal behavior and brain imaging to
Okay.
understand what happens and what changes in the brain when we learn a new motor skill. And so this was the type of project that I was much more interested in. The scale and the scope of the question was much more intriguing for me. So, I
Hmm.
mean, even today, I still have, I have some fish. I can't have real pets in my apartment right now, but I will just sit and watch my fish behave. I'll watch my snails. It's just, I really enjoy animal behavior, including people. So,
I think
yeah.
just with that, I would say that's also a transition, right? That because
Mhm.
you went from molecular biology, looking at it, and you realize you're more into behavioral biology,
Mhm.
neuroscience of it.
Mhm.
And but I think part of that whole thing is having the knowledge you have in the molecular biochemistry system actually give you a better understanding of the neuro part, right?
Yeah,
Because you're kind
absolutely.
of
Absolutely.
going from
I did not take any neuroscience courses as an undergrad because I frankly didn't really know about that field. Neuroscience as a field is still relatively young in comparison to,
Mhm,
say, the other STEM fields.
mhm,
And so I took one neuroscience course in my senior year, in my last semester, when I was pretty sure I was interested in attempting to get into graduate school for this.
mhm.
So that was when I first learned this is a neuron. Like, here's an action potential. All the very basic foundations of neuroscience I learned right before grad school. So, absolutely, when I joined my program, I was probably the youngest person in my program since I went direct from undergrad.
Mhm.
And I was the least experienced because everyone else had at least done some research in the field of neuroscience, and that's why they wanted to do the PhD. So, in some cases, taking a leap into a completely new field or something different without that much background can potentially not only work out, but be the right move for you. Sometimes when we know too much, maybe we lose interest or we lose steam. But I was very motivated to learn that first year in graduate school. I knew nothing about neuroscience.
I do think that's a really good point because I got burned out. Like the time I was leaving, I was been in science biomedical research for 13 years because
Mhm.
I did research molecular cancer biology research in even in high school. So and in undergrad. So by the time it came to that and looking at a 10-year PhD, that's what I was looking
Yeah.
like looking like it was going to be 10 years to finish, and it just it's you run out of steam, and I don't have regrets about the decisions I made, but I do think, yeah, like if you it's it depends on how passionate you are and how motivated you are and how much energy you have left in that battery.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think going into a new field that was very interesting. I love neuroscience. I'm really glad that I learned everything that I did about it. And certainly many things in your life snowball. So the things that you learned at the beginning become the core of allowing you to learn other things and add on to
Mhm.
that. So I do think in science that worked for me. And then also in the professional world, absolutely. Everything that I've done so far has added to my value and the has just opened new doors for me. So yeah, in graduate school, I spent quite a bit of time outside of lab, starting my third year, which I highly recommend for everyone who is in academia to do other things. Um, I think we lose sight sometimes of the fact that we're doing one thing with our life for potentially 4, 5, 6 years in
Mhm.
graduate school. And we're so focused, which is really good. It's important. You got to get your degree, ideally. You publish a
Mhm.
paper, ideally.
Yeah.
But so many things about research are out of your direct control, right?
Mhm.
So you can work so hard, spend all of your time doing nothing but thinking about your project and working and troubleshooting, and it can still fail. And that's
Mhm.
part of science. That's part of research. That's part of discovery. The
Exactly.
problem with that, though, is at the end of the day, if you have not spent some time in diversifying your interests and your skill sets, if you don't have anything to show at the end of any stint in research, that's
Yeah.
not good for your career development, right? So although you have definitely developed a lot of valuable skills, you still need some evidence of, you know, a portfolio, something to show and talk about when you are competing with other people for your next opportunity.
Mm-hmm.
So for myself, it wasn't necessarily even purposeful that I went out and did other things. It was honestly just for my own sanity and my own happiness, because when things go wrong in this huge chunk of your life in the lab,
Yeah.
you need something to balance it, right? Like you
You
need to
need
come home.
fun.
Yeah, you need fun. You need to come home at the end of the day and think, I'm not a 100% complete failure, right? Because I did something else.
Exactly.
Whether it was like I cooked a great meal, I volunteered at this in this group, I wrote an awesome article, and I interviewed an interesting person. You have
Yeah.
to give yourself reasons to feel good about yourself, because
Yeah.
as we all know, like research really can grind you down, and that's not good. That's not good for your projects, and it's not good for you.
Yeah.
So I ended up doing quite a few different things in graduate school alongside of my research. I actually went on Craigslist and would look for gigs. I was looking for anything where I felt I could be useful.
Uh-huh.
Especially in those years when it was really tough. Like my project and my protocol was just not working. I was doing everything I possibly could, but things take time.
Yeah.
So I did actually did like freelance artwork for a random company in Virginia. Over a weekend, they wanted some like whiteboard art. So, you know, that was one of the random gigs that I picked up. And then, so there are some legitimate things on Craigslist sometimes. It's not all shady. I did freelance writing. So I wrote for the Association for Women in Science magazine. It's
Okay.
a volunteer publication, and I took on 3 different feature articles. So
Oh,
I
wow.
actually wrote about women and their progression in academia, in particular getting faculty tenured positions.
Mm-hmm.
Talked about, and then that kind of started a trend for me. And I was like, all right, well, I interviewed a bunch of faculty women and learned about the struggles and challenges to get tenure. Since we know there is a disproportionate number of men in the field in comparison
Mm-hmm.
with the number of women who graduate with PhDs and, you know, go on to do postdocs and faculty. So then I moved on and did an article about women physicians, and then finally about women entrepreneurs. And so just really investigating that entire the diversity of gender within
Yeah.
different fields, and then understanding from the first person perspective what the challenges are that people seem to face. And
Mm-hmm.
so that was really great, because I had to go out and identify who I wanted to talk to. I had to do all the cold reach outs, ask them to be interviewed, you know, write it up. So it was a really great exercise in communication skills. And at the end of the day, I had a really nice portfolio that I could bring out, which I did when I was interviewing for jobs outside of academia. So
So, you were actually right now. What exactly do you do, Vania? Because I know you have your passion project, which is the PhD. We will get into it soon.
yeah.
But what you do, because I know you also live in a very expensive area, San Francisco Bay Area. So, you know, you can sometimes you need both to support your passion project. So,
Sure, yeah. So basically, I left academia and joined a startup company in the Bay Area. So that was my first transition out of academia.
okay.
And that was a life science technology company, essentially. So they made microscopes for neuroscientists. And you can
Oh,
kind of
okay.
see the connection between my
Trajectory.
background, right, as a neuroscientist and someone who enjoyed writing and educating and communicating.
Mm-hmm.
So the current position I'm in, I was actually recruited into very recently. So within the last 6 months or so. Um, I had left the last company in a very different position than when I joined. When I joined my company in the Bay Area, my first organization out of academia, I was on the support team. So I was an application scientist and worked with customers. And then through the next almost 6 years, I then transitioned into marketing, and then I actually transitioned into a sales role at the end of my time at the startup.
Oh,
And
wow.
because my current position, they were recruiting for their new sales team internationally. So I currently work for Mayo Clinic, and I
Oh,
am
okay.
working within their they have a business unit where they do reference diagnostic testing. for clients around the world, actually. So Mayo Clinic obviously is a hospital that serves many patients at the
Yeah.
different Mayo Clinic campuses, but they also serve hospitals and clinics around the world to do esoteric testing. So rare disease testing, kind of more complex testing. And today, in our current age of COVID-19, they have an amazing infrastructure for running tests, for getting clinic results out very quickly,
Oh,
and with
wow.
kind of the best science available. So it's been a really interesting new learning experience for me. I had only done basic neuroscience research before, and now I have been learning a lot more about neurology and
Yeah.
all of the different tests that are available to help diagnose patients with very challenging presentations. So people who may have been misdiagnosed before can look to Mayo Clinic and have their physicians send their samples straight to the same place that Mayo Clinic patients get their testing done. So it's been an amazing experience to
Oh,
learn
wow.
all this new stuff.
So is that a remote type of position, or do you, because I know Mayo Clinic, where is it located? Is in,
It's in Rochester, Minnesota. That
yeah,
is
that's
their
what I
main
thought.
campus. Yeah, and then they have two satellite campuses in Florida and Arizona. Yeah, so actually my position before I joined Mayo Clinic was already remote. So there are positions that are office-based and there are positions that are field-based. So many sales, especially technical sales positions that academics might be interested in, tend to be in the field. So we work and travel to where our customers are located. In my case, my customers for Mayo Clinic are actually in Canada. So I'm actually
Oh,
responsible
wow.
for all of our customers and clients in Canada, but I don't live in Canada. I will just travel a lot to Canada. So yes, it is a remote position.
It's wow. And how often do you usually have to travel? Like now I know you probably have to do a lot of remote, like Zoom calls probably, but
Yeah,
before you
so
were able to travel.
yeah, so I mean, the value of a lot of these field positions is your ability to go out and meet with customers face to face. That's true for the field support positions that are at my previous company, as well as this current position here. So basically travel as much as we need to. If we need to take a week and go and visit customers in different provinces in Canada, for example, then I will go and take multiple trips, or I'll take one trip and just hop around from province to province. In my last job, I traveled to Asia, so I was responsible for sales in Asia Pacific. That meant that I would sometimes take 2 weeks and I would
Wow.
travel around China. China's a really big country, just like the
Yeah.
US. So you can spend a whole week there or 2 weeks. Or I would go to Korea and Japan and Taiwan and Hong Kong. So those were definitely remote positions, because it's a little unfair to those employees if you are asking them to go and travel and then they don't come home, they still go to the office when they're
Yeah.
not traveling. So yeah, many of these positions are remote.
That's great. Now let's get to your passion project. Let's
Yeah.
talk about how you came about it, and maybe you could share some of the tips for people who are thinking about, doing a switch, or may want to think about doing a switch.
Yeah, absolutely. So when I was first trying to leave academia and find a job, as people in academia know, it can be really challenging and you don't really know what to do. You don't know what jobs are right for you. You don't know what's a good fit. And you just kind of send out your resumes and hope for the best. So it's not an easy process, and many people have done it before us. And we just have simply not built a structure or a foundation to pass on a lot of that information to the next wave of people going through the same thing. So I promised myself when I got my first job that I would do something about this issue. Whether it was reaching back to do resume edits and coach people through their process, or if it was building something a little more structured, like a course and making templates and things for people to use moving forward. I was like, I gotta do something about this, because
Yeah.
this process was not easy and I don't want it to go to waste. I want that
Exactly.
value and that experience to be passed on. So around my third year of working in my first job, I started FreethePhD, and it was just an idea in the beginning. I was like, I want to do something to give back to this community. And yeah, started off as a small online course. I actually built out 3 modules where I put in the information that I wish I had known at the time.
Yeah.
So it actually started off with having the right perspective, having the right mindset about what value you might have in the real world if you're not interested in academia. And then I packed in other things like templates for cover letters, advice for interviewing, this kind of thing. And I realized, some people started trying it, and I realized it helps a lot to have more personalized contacts and guidance, right? And I assume for you as well, to have
Yeah.
someone who's an expert or who's been through this to lead you step by step and help you through the process. It's almost necessary for success, especially with something long term like a job hunt, right?
Yeah.
We don't get a job right away. Unfortunately, it's the truth of the matter. It can take months. So to have someone check in on you, to have someone to say, hey, I'm not sure about what I should write back in this email. What do you think of this draft? And have someone say, hey, here's where you might make a better impression. Here's where you might change the tone. These things really matter. It's the little things sometimes that
Oh,
really
yeah.
trip us up, right?
For sure, because when I came into law, I remember I had a CV, like curriculum vitae, right? And it was 6 pages because it had my science publications and presentations and all of that. But, when you're applying for law jobs, in even internships, you have to have a resume, and it's the standard is usually 1 page.
Yep.
And you don't want to send 6-page thing to a law firm or anybody because they're going to be like, you obviously don't know how to give a concise answer to something.
Right.
So I had to redo my whole thing, and I had to actually work with some people who actually were experienced in this patent field, because I'm a patent attorney, meaning I have a technical background and I have done the patent bar exam. So that's why I get to call myself that, and go into the attorney world, because they're a little different even within the attorney world, because the people with technical backgrounds, their experience is highlighted in a different way, because that technical background is really important. So even though generally you have 1-page resume, you're allowed 2 pages. So it's good to know, right? Don't, and there's a format to how you do your resumes too. And that's important to know. If you're a student, you most likely have your education up front. But once you start practicing, you should switch your experience up front. So there's these things that kind of need to know, and work through. And then law schools, of course, have a career services, but they may not be familiar with all different formats sometimes.
Right.
So it's good to it's a good thing to have this kind of information available.
Yeah, absolutely. And sometimes, structure is important, like you said, the number of pages, just the basic things. But on top of that, what I found to be the most lacking right now in someone making a transition is the context of your audience, right? So it's actually the subtle things. You may phrase one experience 5 different ways, depending on who you're talking to. And I think that is so challenging for people who have not worked outside of academia. I mean, I didn't know that myself. Now looking at the way someone talks about their research project, now I know how to help them extract the points of interest for different audiences, right? So if they're applying for a scientist position, they'd highlight one thing. If they're applying for a marketing position, one where they really have to communicate, right? They might be highlighting different parts of that project or different aspects of it that are of interest to the audience. And so it's really understanding the audience's context, their priorities, their challenges, and knowing how to shape what we've done into things that are recognizable for them. That process is tough if you don't have someone who has that perspective.
Absolutely. And reaching out, even the emails, like you mentioned before, it's really important how you write an email, what you put in that 30-second snapshot, because not likely if you write a long email, they may not even read the whole thing. So it's how you approach that greetings, and the first part is really the key, I think.
It is. It is. And it's not something that we necessarily have any experience in coming out of an academic background. So yeah, I mean, I think right now for the PhD as an online community, I've realized that it's really helpful to have other people involved. I wanted to build a place where after someone has transitioned out of academia, no matter at what stage, there's new challenges we have to meet as employees. So no one taught us how to, right, like write these work emails, how to manage coworkers, how to engage and interpret what your manager may tell you, how to deal with customers and clients. And a lot of this can make or break your career, right? And especially since a lot of us from academia have spent some time outside of the workplace, we may have some catch up to do, right? If we would like to advance in the career, if we'd like to become a manager one day. So we need to advance and understand the workplace quickly. And so what we have now is an online community where we can help each other. And a lot of people after they've transitioned, I've been happy that they have stayed on in order to continue to build the community, in order to continue giving each other advice, and then also giving back to new students and postdocs who are looking for opportunities outside of academia.
So is that an online community, like a membership model, or is that
Yeah,
how does it
so
work?
right, it is a low cost monthly membership. There's a lot of opportunities out there for people who need coaching, but I really wanted, my philosophy is this is a passion product for me, right? I have the fortunate circumstance where I have a day job, and so I did not want to build a business model where I charge students and postdocs who already have very little money a lot for these services. Honestly, I feel these are services that should be theirs. It should be something that they have access to anyway. And I know a lot of universities are working on it. But until then, we are a affordable way to get an outside perspective, a third person outside of maybe the career counselor at your institution, to look at your resume and to give you advice and to tell you, hey, you're doing a great job, keep it up. And sometimes it's a nice resource to add on, to whatever people might already be using.
So you already talked about a couple of tips already, but let's to keep the foam kind of. So the first tip is to kind of know what kind of attributes and what looking to why you're changing the jobs, right? It
Yes,
sounded like
self-awareness, very important.
self-awareness and doing that. And that's a process, like I think we chatted about this a little bit before we started this interview, is that that's actually based on your self-awareness grows as you have more experiences. So,
Absolutely. It's hard to know what you don't like if you haven't tried many things, right?
exactly.
So that's actually, so the first, and I think one of the most important pieces of advice is as you're looking to make any transition, whether it's from job to job, whether it's from academia to non-academia, whether it's, from being an employee to becoming an entrepreneur, just know who you are, know your strengths, know your weaknesses. I think every person who's been successful in their life has to understand where their niche is, right? We can't be everything to everyone. It's impossible. So you need to know where your strengths are so that you can either find other people to fill in your weaknesses, or you can work to round yourself out a little bit in places you might be weaker. But you can't do that if you don't know and acknowledge who you are. So certainly self-awareness is tip number one. The second one is something I mentioned earlier as well, which is to do things outside of what you do today as your main focus. So if you're in academia, do something else outside academia. I don't care what it is. Volunteer, walk dogs, it doesn't matter. Do something else that is not within the academic sphere, because you already spend so much time in lab, you don't need more proof that you can do that. But you may need to show proof later when you're applying for jobs that you can do things outside of the confines and the rules of academia, right? Like, do you know how to face deadlines that are really fast? Do you know how to deal with a budget? Like, these are things that people have biases about, especially if you have a PhD after your name. They think that you can't work with people. They think you don't care about money or time. That's not true, right? We can do this, but you need to show this. And this is an initiative that is, unfortunately, the burden is on you and me to demonstrate this. So reserve time to do things you love outside of academia. And I promise you, especially if you do things with other people, it's going to benefit your career development.
I do think with that, I will just add to that, like sometimes, I'm part of a lot of different organizations right now. I'm
Mhm.
part of like attorney organizations. I'm part of some science organization, women in bio type of organizations. But I think also sometimes if you're not into, you don't want to feel like you're always networking. Do
Mhm.
something like going along what you said, something fun, right?
Mhm.
Like there was a while I was tutoring at the public library when I was looking for jobs at when I came out of law school. And that actually gave me like, it was such a good way to share my skill set, teach kids how to do math and science. Anybody who dropped by, and it just kind of was nice to just be out of that anything professional.
Yes,
So,
absolutely. And
it's like,
as I mentioned before, depending on who you are talking to, you can take a tutoring experience like you have, and
yeah,
you can spin it in many different ways, very genuinely, right?
yeah, that's
Um,
right. It
it
was fun.
showcases customer skills, it showcases teaching, it showcases, right? Like so many different important skill sets. So yeah, absolutely. Do things you like, do things that challenge you. That's actually the next piece of advice that I have is be comfortable with becoming a novice at something, right? Like we spend so much time becoming experts in academia in some very specific field. Don't get disappointed in yourself if you need to start over. What you think of as starting over, you're not actually starting over. You're just climbing a new peak. You still have all the experiences that you've built over those last few years underneath your feet, and you're just using them to get into a new place. So you got to learn new things. You had mentioned before that I have an MBA. I mean, I did an app-based MBA because when I joined this startup company, which those of you who are familiar with startups, things can be very up in the air. You need to figure things out yourself. And for
Yeah.
me, I had no business background. So I was like, you know what? It's time to learn about what business is all about. And so I looked for the fastest, most efficient way to do that. And this app was available and it was free. I mean, you can't beat that, right? Like you can
Yeah.
go and you can go and like buy all the business books and try to like force yourself to read them, but this app was very well designed. It was, again, free. I had to apply, but I got accepted. And I'm like, you know what? This is a fantastic opportunity. And to me, it doesn't matter whether or not it's a traditional MBA. I got what I came for, which was that business experience and knowledge to become a better employee in the startup and also do a better job of launching my own passion project. So be aware that to grow, sometimes you need to start at the beginning again of a new field. So embrace being a novice again because you will advance quickly.
Yeah, I do think I have spoken to scientists who are leaving academia and trying to go to a company. And because I intern at like Pfizer in the
Mm-hmm.
legal department. So when that went on my LinkedIn, a lot of scientists who are like doing science reached out to me and was like, "Oh, can you get my resume in? How did you get in?" And I was like, "Look, I'm not in a science role, so that wasn't it." But I do think it's important to understand when you come to biopharmas, even if you have a PhD, if you're joining one of those, you might be starting at the,
The bottom.
yeah.
I'm not
So
I'm not gonna I'm not gonna sugarcoat it. You're gonna start at the bottom
it's
of
like,
somewhere, right? Because we've spent our time climbing the ladder in academia.
yeah.
And whereas I know many people want to jump straight into management out of academia, it can be possible, but it means that the experience that you have and you bring to the table needs to be directly transferable to the type of management positions you're looking for.
Mm-hmm.
And I'll just be honest, most of the time it will not, because our work environment in academia is completely different, right? The
Yeah.
structures, the rewards, the priorities, the challenges, they're different from the context within academia. Unless you are a
Exactly.
PI inside academia, then you may be able to shift directly to, say, a manager or a director of a department, right? But that's the level you need to be at. You need to have responsibility for budgets,
Mm-hmm.
for teams, for the
Mm-hmm.
output of work within this particular segment or department. If you don't have that, you're going to start at the bottom. But that should not be something that stops you, right, from trying something new, because I do have faith anyone coming through academia has the ability to advance very fast. We can go from, say, entry level, maybe an associate or a specialist or a representative level, and we can advance quickly if we want to.
Yeah.
right? Because we're good at learning and we're good at making mistakes and building success on top of those mistakes. So don't be afraid of starting at the so-called bottom somewhere, because that is the way to the top. That is the beginning of how you go where you want to go.
And also, I think it's important to know that when you go for those interviews, the first interviews or the first screens, that interview probably is done by somebody who probably don't have a PhD.
Right.
You know, because you don't get to the PhD person who's going to interview you until you pass the first ones. So, but if you don't pass that first, if you cannot connect with the first person because you feel like, why am I talking to somebody who doesn't even have a science background? You're not going to make it through that. And so that's why I think the mindset is really important to know that, you know, not to be, you know, disrespectful, or not to think it's they're being disrespectful toward you by putting somebody who's not, you know, have a PhD to interview you, because it's kind of
Absolutely.
that how you connect with the
Yes,
team.
absolutely. That's the next tip I have, actually, which is don't rely on your own assumptions about people. So, and about different roles, right? So just because you have a particular background doesn't mean that everyone understands or values that. And just because someone else doesn't have the same background does not mean they are not very intelligent, have a lot of things to teach you, and you know, that you should always have this attitude of learning from others and being very respectful and mindful of others. So again, there are some stereotypes that we face as academics. One of them is that we may have a very large ego and we don't like to work with others, and we're very stubborn and, you know, won't cooperate. And that can be a career killer, because everything that we do outside of academia, even inside academia, you have to work with other people. So be open to others, and don't just think that what you assume is going to be true. Really go out, learn from others, find out what the truth actually is. And that, again, is something you can use in your career and your growth. And the last piece of advice I have, which I think is really important, is to find mentors and guides along the way. There really are so many ways that we can stumble and fall and lose and waste time. So if you find someone who is an expert in the field, who you really jive with, take that advice, right? If there's a book out there you think could offer you some advice and it's like $20, buy it. Like, don't ever turn down the opportunity to be guided by someone who knows what they're doing, whether that's, you know, looking for a coach or someone who's an expert, or finding and seeking advice from others who've been there. So that is really the way to the top faster.
I love that. I love that, because I do think there is a value to kind of that connection, the mentor mentee. And, you know, like at different levels of your career, you're going to have different type of mentors and mentees. Sometimes you are the mentor, sometimes you're the mentee. So, you know, and realize that, you know, there is value to having actually different type of mentors too. So like for me, and there's some of those mentors are not even people I personally connect with. It's just people I watch how they do things, right? Like, you know, looking at somebody like Oprah, for instance, who can, you know, like have run an empire and have built a brand. It's really kind of cool to see how she does things. So like you could, you know, I think especially people who are coming from PhD backgrounds, they are used to investigating and collecting data. So, so
just apply it to yourself. I think there's so many things, we do in the lab, we've learned over and over, and we ditch them as soon as we're thinking about something non-scientific. It's like, don't do that. Apply it everywhere. Apply it to yourself.
Yeah, it's an experiment. It's a living experiment.
You are an experiment. Your career is an experiment.
Yeah, exactly. And if something doesn't work, it's okay to say, you know what, this is not worth the time, and let's do something a little different. You know, like
maybe my hypothesis was wrong, right? So
exactly. And I think in the talk, going back to one of your tips about self-awareness, like in retrospect, I could see why I am where I am, like why entrepreneurship really appeals to me. And launching appeals to me because of things I value, the autonomy and the freedom and all of that. But, you know, you're not going to realize that right up front. So
Yeah.
sometimes you had to take the detours.
Yeah. I think a lot of times when people go to career panels, they hear these stories where people went from like A to B to Z to W to, like, and you're like, oh, it sounds so random. But always for that person looking back, they see the threads that led
Hmm.
them from one place to another, right? And so
Exactly.
that's what you're looking for. Just cultivate those directions in yourself and believe that it's okay to have a preference, to have an opinion about what you
Yeah.
want to do and what you're good at.
And so I always end my interviews with asking, what do you do to stay mindful? And especially with COVID-19, and we are in shelter in place right now. So what do you do to, like, you kind of touch on how you have a lot of hobbies, so you look for things to do. So given that you can't really leave the house right now that
Mm-hmm.
much, then I know you used to sing. Do you still sing? And what do you do?
I haven't lately. I did used to do that. I was one of my activities outside of academia as a grad student. I would say to stay mindful, honestly, today in our social media influenced world, I've found lately, especially in our time, to get a little stuck in some echo chambers on social
Mhm.
media, right? People will share the same articles. They will be often griping about things, which is important. You need to vent. But if you're exposed to too much of that constantly, it actually becomes a drag on you, on your mental state. So I would say just take a break. Just forcibly step away from what other people are saying
Mhm.
and really spend, like, protect the time that you have to just be and feel and celebrate who you are and what you actually care about and what you think. I really think you need that reset because today social media is just endless. News is
Mhm.
endless. Everyone has their own perspective that they're bringing to the table. And while that's great, it can also get really overwhelming. And sometimes you're just like, I can't take another person's opinion. I cannot read another sad headline, right? Like
Yeah,
I just, you need to protect your own faith in yourself and in your worldview and in others. And I really think it's very important. We're going to have probably months of change to deal with as a country and as a world of
mhm.
humanity. So we have to keep ourselves energized and positive and have faith in the things that you think are going to carry us forward. You have to recharge that battery. So unplug from other people's opinions and go do something that you find personally relaxing. So for me, I've been trying to get back into some art. Actually,
Yeah.
coaching other people and giving back and helping others is a great way to recharge your battery and feel that you're a part of the solution, right? So do something that you feel is impactful to others. I think that always helps.
I love that, because actually part of the reason I'm putting out a lot more interviews right now is that my way of kind of connecting
Mm-hmm.
and changing. And this is my passion project, building this YouTube community and the YouTube content, because it's something I have been wanting to do. And I launched last year and I just didn't have as much time. So this has been a lot of fun, and I absolutely agree. It's good to tune out, get out of, like, even have an electronic free afternoon if you can,
Yeah.
or day if you
Yeah.
can. I do that sometime. I let my family know that I'm not going to be responding to text messages or calls, and I'm literally like tune out, you know.
You need a technology detox
Yeah,
sometimes.
yeah. It's like, so thank you, Vania, for joining me today
Thanks
and
for having
sharing these
me.
tips. Yeah,
Yeah, it
I,
was fun.
this was fun, and we should do one of these again, because I think there's a lot more we could share, and it's a lot of good information. I definitely know there's a lot of people who are trying to transition in
Hmm.
and out, and I think anytime you watch this, anybody who's in a graduate level, or even if you're a high schooler who are looking at this, it's a good material to think about how your
Yeah,
career could be transitioned and how you could approach things. So
absolutely.
I will put your podcast information and your the PhD everything below this video,
Great.
so how they could connect with you. And until next time, thank you.
Yeah. Bye.
Bye.